Hello and welcome to Ideas with Diana. With this episode, I'd like to talk about my remembrances of President Carter. And what happens with basically, well, this discussion of President Carter started when I took a friend of mine. I went with him to his doctor's appointment. Drove down from Kenosha. It's a little bit of a cold day today, so it was very, it sort of got a little bit longer ride than normal. On the way back, we stopped at the store. Then we went over to Wendy's in Kenosha, where we normally did when both of us lived in Kenosha. We now live in Racine. And at that time, we started talking about President Carter. My friend served in the Navy during the Vietnam period. He was a non-commissioned officer. And I was a civilian contractor during the first Gulf War, helping in medical, and later with the Air Force, helping in systems and liaison with the Society for Computer Simulation. Well, when we talked about Carter, a friend of mine mentioned an important point. He says, well, you know, Carter is the only president that actually served. And in the 20th century, that's true. Carter was the only president that actually served. And he mentioned also, we both agreed that Carter came from humble backgrounds and was able to make it all the way through college as a naval officer with very specialized training in nuclear engineering, and later as president. In addition, running a business in the private sector and making the business go. But also the thing about his character and that though, because my parents always remembered with President Carter, even with Marilyn Carter, how they did so much for mental health. And for my family, that's very important. And and even when Carter ran for a second term, I voted for Carter in 1980. That was the first year I was able to vote. Years later, I'd vote Republican. In 84, I voted for Reagan. And primarily was because the Democrats led FODAD. And my dad, who worked as a civilian contractor before me, said, "You realize the lead phone is not a telephone? No, it actually is a 300-baud teletype with all the letters set to caps." And the reason why that's done so no one could use any type of yelling or anything else. All conversations had to be kept civil in caps. The reason 300 baud is so someone can't send a big blurb of information. They had to think about what they had to send. So 300 baud is equivalent to 30 characters per second. Or another way to think about it is 1 million times slower than today's internet. Amazing, 1 million times. But when we talked about former President Carter, we talked about the values of America United States. I refer to it as the old United States that he and I both grew up in, where regardless of your beginnings, you could still move up, still move forward. You could have one person work and support a family, compared to today where you have both husband and wife work and the kids work, and there's still over leverage to pay for these highly expensive trucks and other stuff. And as I see them leave at 4 in the morning to go to work in Chicago or out towards West Milwaukee and Milwaukee, come back at 9 o'clock at night. And the only time they really have time to celebrate is Friday night, because even the bar in my neighborhood, it's only open till 2 o'clock on Friday and Saturday nights. Rest of the nights, it closes at 10 o'clock, which is amazing when you think about it for a bar. And even on New Year's Eve, it wasn't open on New Year's Eve. So now, in the United States of Jimmy Carter, bars were open till 2 o'clock. People could buy a 6-pack of beer, or buy wine and have something and drink, and we had more freedoms than we did today. You could speak freely. Like some of the things that Elon Musk is accused of, you could actually it wasn't anything different back then. People could speak freely. You didn't have to worry about saying, well, you did a microaggression, you did a macroaggression. And you have to remember, when President Carter came into office, the United States went through a very traumatic period with Watergate, the Vietnam War, and it almost tore the country apart. But what happened was people had good values, and people thought about, and they realized this country was worth keeping together, but they realized it's worth keeping together with the values. Now today, as I was talking with, I said, well, I said today we live in the United States at 2.0, the sequel. And like most people know, when you watch a movie, the sequel is not as good as the original, and it's not. And I told my friends, I said, no, the reason why a lot of people voted for Trump and a lot of people, Democrats even voted for Trump, is the hope that basically we can get out of this United States 2.0, the sequel, where basically, and get back to what we used to have in the original United States of freedom to move forward economically, not be socially in amber. When you get a job, you got this, and there's no upward mobility. Or if you want to get upward mobility, you got this high student debt that bankrupts you. I mean, during President Carter's time, it was very hard to imagine student debt because many people went to community colleges or colleges like UW Parkside. You graduated without student debt. And like UW Parkside was established as many system colleges in Wisconsin outside of Madison and UW Milwaukee as system colleges where people were working. They couldn't afford a lot for college, but they still could get a good degree, good job, and they didn't have the student debt. And that was common for many years because for many years, all the way up, I think, even up to somewhere a little bit up to the mid-90s, I think, you could graduate Parkside without student debt. Nowadays, students graduate Parkside at other, quote, UW system campuses, the other campuses outside of UW Milwaukee, with a student debt of $45,000 or more. And that's ridiculous. And what happened was this puts people down. But the thing is, what happens is, why is it a student debt? This is because our country has changed. And in the country of President Carter, there were things that stopped this tuition inflation, this professor inflation, other stuff, and other forms of inflation, other added costs, or that nickel and dime people to death. So the thing about President Carter is I always remember Carter as a very noble man, a very noble president. And basically, even during the Iran situation, I still remember him as a noble president, a very honorable man in that, though. And that's why I voted for him for the second term. At that time, Democrats were a good party. They weren't broken and they weren't busted as they are now. And many people ask me, they say, well, you say you're a Republican, but when you talk, you sound like an old Democrat. Thank you. Yes. Again, like Ronald Reagan, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. And especially the old Democrats, about caring for people, about not giving in to special interest and other stuff, and about this elitism where people have to have a big student debt to get a promotion. What's wrong with people working the trades? I mean, when Carter was president, I remember in high school, my class was the last class in Kenosha, high school class in Kenosha, to be able to say, when we graduated, we didn't have to worry about having a job after we graduated, no matter what our grade point average was or anything else. I graduated in the top 1% of my class in high school, was in the National Honor Society. Other friends basically were good at the trades. Their intention was not to go to college. And what happened was they said, and they had more options than just going to the Motors. But because what happened at that time in Kenosha, there's American Motors, there's Eaton, there's Mack White Wire Lope, Johnson Wax, Case IH, Walker Manufacturing. Now this is getting into the scene, and some other companies. So what happened was but when they went in, they went in at a middle class income, and they went in with an income to support a family, have 2 kids, have a car, send them to a college like Parkside, or even if the kids basically could afford to go to college like Madison. And they could do this on one income, not both husband and wife working, just one income, one income, not even one part-time income under President Carter's time. You can't do that today. You ask people, say, well, okay, can you afford just to, what happens if your wife or your spouse can't work or your partner can't work? Can you afford to live the lifestyle you live, pay for the cars, pay for the trucks, and pay for the internet? And see, this is why I call it the United States 2.0. Technology was supposed to make things better, but it has become more more where people become more in hawk, and also people are more over leveraged. So in President Carter's time, we had a point where we did have high interest rates on the poor Volcker, but people still survived, and we went past that. But the thing is, President Carter always kept a very noble purpose, and the United States at that time, it was a noble purpose. We were respected worldwide. We weren't just thought of as a military superpower. We were thought of as hegemonic. We were thought as basically people willing to help you, people willing to help you go. But what happens after the Cold War, we lost it. I thought basically we learned from the lessons of the Cold War and not get the big head, but we did. And that's why I say United States 2.0, and that's why Carter represents a time when we did have, where we didn't get the big head. We realized that values do count, family values count. And even with LGBT, basically, I'm not sure what the official views of President Carter or Carter administration were, but what I remember those, even back then, there was LGBTQ plus, but it was referred to as a different way. But people still could work, people could still do things. Because in Chicago, I met a lot of people who were lesbian, gay, and also trans, but they could still work, they could still do things, but they didn't have to do these extreme things that are done now since when Obama took office with the cultural warriors and other stuff, which I call United States 2.0. No, they didn't have to. And in Carter's time, it was a matter of decorum, a matter of, basically like, whatever you do in your own house, you ever like to do inside your own house, like that, though, long as you don't bother your neighbors and you don't cause distress. Like, even like when I went out today, like this is how I dressed today, basically a sweater, top, leggings, a warm winter coat. Nothing. And when I went with my friend to his hospital appointment, I didn't have to announce that I was LGBTQ. I didn't have to announce I was trans, but I did have to take a call from an attorney because I am concerned sometimes that in this new hyper-political lawfare culture that I am being targeted recently. So I had to talk with my attorney about it and about other issues. But the thing is, in Carter's time, people realized about even when people would do targeting, when someone said, well, targets, surround people that don't have opposite viewpoints to you. The old Democrats would have never endorsed that. They never would have endorsed. But there's a friend of mine who is a Republican, and she tells me about how in this new United States 2.0, in the new cultural warriors, how at one building they surrounded her and harassed her, and she still has a nervous condition because of it. So that's why when I think of President Carter, I think of a time in the United States when we did have full freedom of speech, and we did have full respect of each other. And I'm going to use a different word other than respect because it's been abused by different cultural warrior groups, where we did understand each other and we did live with each other and coexist with each other. And that's what I think about President Carter and in the original United States. And my hope is that basically we can get back to that original United States with the values that Carter and that he and his wife exemplified during their administration. Because this United States 2.0 sometimes reminds me of the Twilight Zone. And sometimes when I go to Kenosha and step out, it's like stepping out of the Twilight Zone. And I would consider moving back to Kenosha if I could get back to a 2-bedroom apartment, but this time I would need a car because public transportation has become worse and I do need to get around. I do think President Carter represented good values of the original United States that many people would support no matter what their political persuasion or what their sense of self is. And I do hope that we could get back to that instead of this United States 2.0. That's why I'm hoping for the next administration to be able to help move us towards that again. In that, basically, with what President Carter did, and I hope that the incoming President Trump, will consider what Carter exemplified and try to follow those ideas, because I do feel the Democratic Party is broken. It's corrupt. It's completely lost. And also with lawfare, like I told a friend, the lawfare reminds me of American version of the Tale of Two Cities, except this time the press, instead of being the Scarlet Pimpernel, the press was being Madame, or what was her name, the one who wanted to put someone through double jeopardy so that they could see the head cut off with the guillotine. And that's why I think we need to get back to a United States that President Carter exemplified. And that's why I always respect President Carter for the work he has done, and for as president, even with actually after being president with Habitat for Humanity. So let me know what you think. I prefer to be reached with comments on Twitter, or basically on comments on Twitter at Diana1A, or Ideas with Diana, or even on YouTube. Just to remind us, sometimes it takes me a while to respond to comments because sometimes I have my good days and bad days. So just give me time. If I don't respond, it's not because I don't want to respond. It's just sometimes I have my moments like that, though. This has been Ideas with Diana and my remembrance of President Carter.